it would be appropriate to recognize or put her at step 12 on this pay scale. That recognizes roughly half of her years of experience. So it's kind of trying to strike a balance between the fact that she's not worked in education before, but for an operations and facilities related, heavy operations and facilities related positions, she does have a lot of applicable experience. It doesn't really fit into like a, entry level pay scale. So that would put on this proposed pay scale, that would put her at step 12. I'm proposing a 200-day contract. So that's about 20 days less than our administrator. Our administrators this year are on a 220-day contract. Again, when we factor sort of total cost to the school, we figure about a 32% overhead. That's what our overheads historically work out to be. So that includes things like PERS and benefits. So that puts our annual wage at about 52K. Fully loaded cost differential of that versus just if we stuck with our kitchen management position and stayed there and didn't make any changes would be about 13K. So that's really the number, the sort of differential in what we thought we were going to spend when we approved the budget without understanding what was, all the things that we were really expecting of Dawn. That's really the differential that we need to consider as the material change. Are there any questions on this slide?
I've always got a question. So
yeah, go for it.
My question is, how do we deal with the fact that she manages someone who has more contract days?
Yeah, I talked to Dawn about that, and the thought was that, especially since most of those days off will be in the summer, while our custodian is in the building, most of the time during the summer, the grass needs to be mowed, there's things to fix, that it should not be necessary for his manager to also be in the building, every day. There's certainly an expectation of, being able to work on tasks in a self-directed manner, for weeks at a time, especially in the summer. I think if we were looking at our custodial and grounds organization being much larger, like they were, say, at D21, where you've got 10 or 15 custodial staff doing everything, taking care of multiple buildings and sports fields and everything, that would probably be really tough to do. But I think at the scale we're operating at, Dawn and I certainly seem to agree that it should be okay. With that said, I will say the 200 days is a little bit of an attempt to balance, overall cost to the school, total annual cost of the school. It'd be great to have, I've no doubt if we added more days of this contract that we could use those days in a year like this year. But what I kind of talked to Dawn about is let's do our best to try to balance, total cost of the school that's committed in the contract. And then on an as needed basis, if we identify the need to go beyond that, we can pay, at the same rate for additional days, but with it, we not guarantee those days in the contract.
And Thad, can I add something?
Yeah.
Yeah. The administration will be there those 20 days that she is not, and will oversee the work of the maintenance and custodian.
You feel that answers your question, Julia?
That does, and I appreciate the thoughtful presentation and all of the work you guys have done to put this together.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Anyone else have any questions before we go to, I believe, the last slide? All right, let's move to slide 6. So I tried to capture there's 3 things that I'd like to ask the board to consider for approval here tonight. I'd like the board to consider approving the changes I presented to the lead custodian compensation schedule. And that, like we've done in the past, we make, when we've made changes after a contract year starts, that we make those retroactive to this most recent July 1st. So Mitch has been working in July on he's worked the first month and a half of his contract already. Last year when we made compensation schedule changes post July 1st, we made them retroactive. So I'd like to consider ask the board to consider that. I'd like to ask the board to consider doing the same for what we just talked about and I presented for the operations and logistics manager position. And then through this process and sort of doing this research, it also became clear to me that because of unprecedented need this past last contract year, 2022-23, that our custodian worked at least an extra week of time throughout that year, usually over holidays, to accomplish things that needed to be done in the building, but that could not be done while staff and students were actively using the building. And that those were sort of done on the understanding that that time would be comped in the form of extra time off this summer. That time off didn't happen because since April and the ensuing sort of facilities related things we've had happen, there's been additional need for that time off to not happen. And so in recognition of that, and just trying to do the right thing, I'd like to ask the board to consider approving compensating our custodian for an extra week. So that's an extra 5 days of time at his 22-23 hourly rate. So this is really compensation for time not paid last contract year. It's not a lot of money, and I think but I think is definitely the right thing to do, just to sort of rectify some understandings that appear to be in place that didn't work out. I think for not because of any ill intentions, but just because of a cascade of events that made it hard for Mitch to get the time off.
Thank you, Thad.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Julia.
Yeah, I'm not an accountant, Thad, but I do know it gets tricky when you get compensated in 1 year for work done in a previous year for tax reasons. And I just wonder if anyone's asked the ESD about this last week of pay and whether or not it'd be cleaner for Mitch if we made it for a week of pay in 2023 rather than kind of this big for that last contract year, because that spans 2 years.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that there's really two things to consider there. One is the rate at which the work will be compensated. So we can decide that. So I'm recommending that it be compensated at last contract years, the one that just ended in June, hourly rate. The other is mostly an accounting issue in terms of which contract year, which fiscal year that expense is counted against. And I'm happy to take that up with our business management. The amount of money we're talking about is small enough, and I'm not sure it matters a whole lot, but probably we can defer to the judgment of our business management to do the right thing there.
Does anyone else have any questions about any part of these recommendations that Thad and Jen have put together?
Can we adopt, would it be possible to agree to the last one with the caveat that unless it causes a problem for the ESD to do this kind of back pay?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I would say that if I engage ESD and find out that they're concerned about it or need additional consideration, then I'll just bring that item alone up for consideration in a future board meeting, with the inclusion of additional input from our business management. We can definitely approve it contingent on that.
That would make me more comfortable. I just want to.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's a good point.
All right, so let's focus on the last one first, then I guess is we can break it up so that we don't have to approve them all. As written, we can just say, a motion to approve compensating the MCS custodian for 1 week unpaid in 22-23 per whatever guidelines the ESD sets in place for how we pay that. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, I would say per agreement with our business management that, we can do so in a way that's, squares with best business practices and accounting principles, and we'll easily pass any kind of audit.
Sounds great. All right, thanks for that clarification, Thad. Can we get a second? Thad, thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Post your opposition. And then for the first two, aligning the MCS lead custodian compensation as proposed and the new position, do you feel, I don't feel like we need separate proposals to approve that. I think we can just approve both of those with no, as long as there's no revision. So I make a motion to approve the alignment of the custodian compensation as proposed and create new position for operations and logistics manager as proposed. We get a second?
I'll
Thank
second.
you, Julia. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Motion's passed. And stop sharing my screen right now. I think that brings us to our exec session.
My brain can't remember. Did we approve Jen's 3 hires?
We did.
Okay, just checking. I know we went through them, but couldn't remember if we did a motion.
1 second here. All right, so that'll bring us to item number 5, exec session, to consider the employment of a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent. So we'll end this public meeting now. We'll go into exec session. Those who are going to be joining us there will have their links, and then we'll bring you in, and then the board will have questions, and we'll bring you back out. And at the conclusion of those exec sessions, we'll come back into public session. Thank you. We'll see you on the other side of this.